Rich Dad's Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver by Mike Maloney. So, the basic premise of this book is that the purchasing power of gold and silver, it's going to rise significantly in the near future, according to this book. Note that this book was written in August of 2008. So, why? Well, there are three reasons. One, there'll be a threat of deflation. Two, the Federal Reserve will respond to this threat of deflation with massive currency or money creation. And three, Mike Maloney argues that gold revalues itself periodically to account for all of the money created. 1. There'll be a threat of deflation. So why does he think there'll be this threat? Well, the popping of a debt bubble decreases the money supply, because whenever a loan goes bad, that money just disappears in the same way that when that loan was created, that money was created out of thin air. As the money supply falls, deflation sets in too. Deflation puts pressure on people, businesses, and governments that have debt. The prices of assets like stocks and houses fall as they are sold to make these debt payments. People get laid off, they don't want to spend as much, prices fall, and voila, further deflation. Secondly, the Fed's response to this deflation will be massive inflation, so they'll create a lot of money. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, the Fed dramatically increased the money supply. It'll do the same thing in the future when the next crisis hits, according to the argument of the book. So, Maloney argues that the Federal Reserve has two choices. One, look, they can keep increasing the money supply to keep interest rates low in the US. This staves away the threat of a recession. The US economy will appear to look okay because low interest rates reduce pressure on consumers, make it easier for businesses to borrow, and they reduce interest payments that the US government has to pay. Problem is that they cannot do this indefinitely. At some point, if they keep printing money, even with the low velocity of money, it'll eventually lead to significant inflation. And two, the second choice is they can stop increasing the money supply, or even decrease it back to what it was. This will raise interest rates. Higher interest rates will cripple the US economy. Higher rates make it harder to get loans. People with loans find it harder to pay them off. That leads to more bankruptcies. More bankruptcies lead to some banks failing. Some banks failing leads to people losing their savings. And that could lead to government bailouts. And okay, that's a bit depressing. Basic point is, Mike Maloney doesn't think the US economy can handle an increase in interest rates. And so the Fed is left with these two choices of increasing the money supply further, which will eventually lead to significant inflation, or they can stop increasing the money supply, but that'll raise interest rates and lead to a major recession. So that's Mike's argument for why a big increase in the money supply is likely in the future. But what does this have to do with gold and silver? Well, he argues, and this is the third major point in this book, that gold and silver revalue themselves periodically to account for all of the money created. Not just a little bit of the money, or like half the money, or no, like all the money created. Pretty major statement. He argues they've done so twice in the last 100 years in the US. So gold went from $20 to $35 an ounce in 1933. And that was to account for all of the money that was created during World War I and later during the gold exchange standard. Gold went from $35 to $800 an ounce in the 1970s to account for the money that was created to fund the Vietnam War and the Great Society. Then beyond that, he gives some other historical examples. In 407 BC, he says that gold revalued itself in Athens to account for deficit spending that was done to fund war. In Rome, gold went from 50,000 to 2.12 billion denarii from 301 to 350 AD, after deficit spending was done again to fund war. In France, in 1720, gold and silver revalued themselves to account for the deficit spending funded by John Law. And that's a whole nother story. And in Germany, this is probably something that, closer to our time, gold went from 100 marks an ounce in 1914 to 87 trillion marks an ounce in 1923, as Germany printed a lot of money for war and reparations. Now, at the time that this book was published, which is the 28th of August 2008, gold was at $838.25 per ounce. Silver was at $13.63 per ounce. At the time of this video, gold is at $1,110 per ounce, and silver is at $14.67 an ounce. So, you may be thinking, well, do I think gold and silver will rise dramatically as Mike has forecasted them to? To tell you the truth, I don't know. I have no idea.